about the philosophy of love, relationships, and intimacy. Um, when we talk about things like love and intimacy, it is very subjective. Very subjective and very, very much based within the realm of the beholder. Some people are capable of a type of love and intimacy and I mean a very, very deep, I want to say something grander than deep. What one might reference when they talk about soul bonds, when they talk about soul mates. Maybe that's what I'm trying to describe or explain. So, there's some problems with love, of course, and with relationships in general. There's some problems even within friendships, and how you basically analyze and affect those problems makes you decide the kind of people that you're going to want to spend your time with, who is acceptable, I guess, who is within the pall of the society that you want to live in on a daily basis, on a monthly basis, or even on a very, very sparse basis. Now, when we talk about love, we need to talk about some concepts of obsession, of care and want, of desire. All of those things are within the philosophy of what one would term love in general. Obsession is the way that most people who are psychological analyzers, I suppose, they would commonly term what one person would call love when they are experiencing it as a obsession mirror, I suppose, within the brain. So you have your brain, and we can see when somebody has an obsessive quality or an obsession about something. Because there are people who have maybe OCD who are very obsessive. And when those people are going through those obsessive states, they can, of course, analyze their brains and see what areas are being affected, what areas are getting larger amounts of blood, things of that nature. I'm not quite sure how incredibly deep we can go into such scans of the brain, but even on their superficial level, we can determine that many of the same centers that are active during an obsessive cycle, and that is from someone who is not in love, that is from someone who is more like the person from what is that movie? It gets no. What is that Jack Nicholson movie that where he's an obsessive compulsive disorder lunatic basically, and he's washing his hands and having to turn doorknobs 7 times, things of that nature. Well, gosh, if I can remember that movie, if I can't, either way, it's a good movie. Go watch it. Jack Nicholson. If you put in Jack Nicholson OCD movie or writer OCD movie, it's a great movie. It's really actually quite a good movie. Helen Hunt's, nipples are in it as well, for what it's worth. Not worth that much. she's pretty enough. All right, so let's talk about the idea that, that same function that creates a need to turn a knob 7 times because otherwise, I don't know, I'm not obsessive in that particular way. I may be more obsessive in a love way. the idea that that same or those same centers are being affected when a person is in a state that they would call love is a very odd idea. And it kind of begs a question of what is it that is occurring within the mind when those centers are being activated, and not for the obsessive compulsive person, but for the obsessed person who is in love, as it were. And what is the activation point for when those obsessive natures start to deride and break down, and the obsessive love that we have is no longer there? And perhaps there are types of love which are never going to be extirpated from the form of a man or woman that falls into love. But in the same sense, a great many people feel these same feelings in very, very youthful and basic ways, and at youthful and basic times in their life. And so there is something to be said that if you were to look into enough stories of I like this woman and this happened and this happened and then this happened and I really loved her and then this happened and this happened and I hated her, you can say, maybe with a little bit more obvious evidence why or how obsession can be maybe more broken. If you were to want to look into the philosophy of why a person stops going through that love cycle. And obviously there can be some pretty... And what's funny is that maybe they don't. Because let's talk about the idea that people can still remember that one girl who, when they were 7 or whatever, that, they were really in love with, and then she literally, played with their heart for a day, and then the next day she was like, I don't like you. I'm sure that, there's something to be said for the fact that maybe they are still in love because that center or that pathway within their brain was made at that time. Now, we're going to go and give ourselves a little bit of leeway here, and what I mean by that is we're going to look at some things related to the subjects that we're talking about, and maybe, just throw up some images as well so that we might be able to talk about some of the things that we're seeing or some of the things that we're effectively looking at. Now, when we think of love, I'm not necessarily in a heavy agreement with maybe all of these images that we're seeing in front of us. Some of them are very kind of childish looking. But, obviously the heart is a very, very important factor. The heart. The emotional center of the human form. Or at least as it was imagined in antiquity. The heart. Why is the heart so intrinsically connected to love? It's a very interesting idea. Is it because, when you have those moments of incredible feelings, your heart can kind of, beat a little bit strangely, and there's that tightness in your chest area, and there's, I don't know, I guess the butterflies in your stomach are, not related to your heart. I don't know, it's a, why the heart and the heart chakra maybe, and that whole ideal behind it, why is it so relegated to love? Interesting too that, I believe, that chakra it's at least very near the middle, right, of the 7 chakras that you have. I don't know too terribly much about chakras for what it's worth. But there is something to be said that, maybe it's because it's that middle point within the human form. That point of connection between thought and passion. I don't know. It's interesting to think. So, looking through these, not really much to be said about, love in this manner. Ugh, It's they, this is almost the Hollywood version of love. Very trite and very artsy and attempting to, instead of be life imitating art, I'm sorry, instead of art imitating life, they're trying to make things that are life or art in, oh gosh, life imitating art, excuse me. My poor stupid brain. So, the idea that they want to create within your head this form of love, this ideal of love, while not always basing it necessarily on the reality of love. And I'm sure, for what it's worth, there was a great many people who took a uh, walk on the beach for the first time with some new person, and they were just, enamored with it. And, so that's why we've got that. But I remember I had a date with a woman that I love, and I didn't necessarily feel this strongly at the time, but we went to the beach and we just sat there on a log for a while and talked, and we didn't go for some romantic walk. It was later when we went to, an arboretum that I knew that I actually, we had a much more romantic time. Yeah, so sometimes, I just feel as if people, a lot of Courtney Love here is annoying me. But sometimes people just want to live the ideas that they've seen in movies. They want to live the form that they've seen in. They want a movie kiss. Nothing is more insulting than to ask for a movie kiss. Because a movie kiss is the most unreal, ungenuine thing in all of, existence. They want, instead of to be, fair and, just, they want somehow to cast you aside and for you to run back at the last moment, before they get onto the airplane. But life often is much more like the Frasier episode where that happens. Where he goes and he catches her right at the last moment, and she says, "Oh, that's so great that you came. I really wanted you to." And then her flight gets delayed or her flight was delayed for a small amount of time. And then he says, "Well, you could delay your flight for a few more days or something." And then she keeps talking and talking about how she loves her, cat, and he hates cats. And then she talks about how she, is a vegan or something, and of course he's not. And so over the course of this short moment, you realize that these two people are actually not meant for each other at all. And it's in that romantic, life imitating art moment, that you're kind of, put in your place. But, the thing is that we're beaten down by it. Look at this. It says love wins there, Um, I agree that, love is an end to a means that we can't get in our own lives by ourselves. And it's a grand thing. Um, it's just interesting, that what we term as love can also be termed as a type of obsession, termed as a type of, and that can easily turn into a negative thing for what it's worth. People who are obsessed and who are unrequited can very easily, if they don't have any kind of sound justification for their own mind and spirit, can easily be led into, a path of stalking or something disturbing and strange. I'm sure that, if you really and see, the thing is that in your mind it's justified because of the obsession. And that's maybe where we get back into the point of the obsession, is that in Jack Nicholson's mind, and As Good as It Gets. There it is. Stupid brain of mine. And As Good as It Gets, he's sitting there and he's justified in turning the knob 6 times or whatever he does it for. He's justified. And, so when your mind can say that that's justified, and then you can extrapolate it to something much larger like love and obsession about a person, I can see why why stalking is such a problem potentially. Because obsession is not two-sided. Love is two-sided, but obsession is not, and it could be love on one side for what it's worth, in theory or in the mind of the person, but it is clearly obsession from another standpoint. So love obviously is a very complex ideal. This is so strange that love hormone, what is oxytocin? But it's so strange that they have 2 men there kissing, it appears anyway, because men have much worse oxytocin release and ability to release oxytocin and express it in any type of relationship, because we are just it's a more feminine hormone that is more easily produced by the feminine body, the female body. So, a testosterone-laden man is not necessarily as high in oxytocin, and it's a lot harder to maybe access it. So it's a strange thing that they would have done that there. Oxytocin, for what it's worth, is an incredibly valuable thing. When you are... I felt like, and I don't know that it's true, but I had a pig, and she was having a great deal of problems passing a piglet. It was only one piglet, which was good, because I am not that rich. I can't necessarily afford to have a litter of piglets. That means I have a litter of things to kill, because I have no money. Can't afford all of them. They go out into the wilderness on their own, I suppose. So, I wouldn't do that either. It's very, very bad to have wild pigs. Anyway, so she was having problems, and I know that oxytocin is used in order to cause vaginal contractions during birth. Now, I don't have oxytocin, obviously, but what I do have is, the ability to pet her and say she's good and say I love her, and, actually try to, and this is kind of a bit bougie, but try to affect the water cells within her body so that they are, literally affecting the rest of her body, or any of the liquid cells, I suppose, because, that's what you're doing, right? You're using your voice to transmit energy into a cell, and that cell then is more able to function and hopefully release oxytocin. And, also the laying on of hands to it often, is a good way to transmit oxytocin. And by laying on hands, I mean touching something. And so I was petting her, and I had a girlfriend at the time, and I was asking her to pet her as well, and it actually worked out where her contractions, increased and were not as, awful. And unfortunately, the pig was backwards, so I had to pull it out. I had to grab it by its hind legs and, do this as a little knuckle maneuver you do so that, it won't slip out of your hand, and then you wait till she's pushing and you pull it out. Took a couple of pretty hard pushes for that poor creature. But anyway, that's a second story. That's got very little to do... Well, it's got something to do with love. Because I love that creature, and I want it to be healthy and happy. And in that effort, I would, want to properly husband it. If you know anything about animal husbandry, and if you have animals, you better, I understand how oxytocin maybe affects, and wouldn't it be great to have it on hand to actually give an injection? But I know how it affects an animal, and I know how, transfers of such things can occur. So it is about love, and, animal husbandry is definitely about love. If you have an animal that's sick and dying, it's there's more love in the killing of it than the allowing of it to suffer onward. Yeah, that's a weird one too, talking about love. All right, so I want to back up a little bit here. And why don't we just real quick, since we've been talking about love, let's just get a very awful attempt at describing it. Let's see. Maybe Wikipedia's okay. I don't know. I'm being a little bit crass. All right, so love encompasses a range of strong and positive emotional and mental states. Wow, that's very bland. From the most sublime virtue or good habit, the deepest interpersonal affection. From the most sublime virtue or good habit. What the fuck are they talking about? All right, let's try and slow down. To the simplest pleasure. What? God damn, I'm glad I explained this before we used this as a definition. An example of this range of means is that love of a mother's differs from the love of a spouse. Yeah, but that doesn't mean it has anything to do with the simplest pleasure. That's just called pleasure. That's not called love, you psychos. And what does virtue have to do with love necessarily? Maybe you love someone because of their virtues, but the love is... let's soldier on for a moment. Example of this range of means is that love, blah, 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 which differs from the love of food. The love of food. No, it probably doesn't, because if you're willing to say, I love food, it probably is the same. And what's really actually probably happening is that you're degrading what love is to be something that's much more common and worthless. Most commonly, love refers to a feeling of strong attachment and emotional attachment. Oh, really? And get to the actual fucking meaning at the fucking end. All right. That's a point, though, that at least, we didn't mention, that with love, there is a very large attachment, cycle that occurs. For men, I don't know exactly when that occurs. That is to say, I don't know when the cycle of attachment for love really is enacted, but for women, there is something that actually does occur when they have sex with a man that makes it so that they are more in what we would call love. There's some kind of we could go look it up in a very easy way, and if you'd like to, go look up the words hormone released after a woman first makes love to a man that makes her more attracted to him, and you'll find it. It's a long one, but I'm sure even with all those extra words, you'll find it. So, a couple of things that are finally getting to something interesting. There's 6 forms of love to Greek philosophers. Essentially, familial love, friendly love, platonic love, romantic love, self-love, guest love, divine love. Well, maybe. I don't know. Guest love seems kind of strange. But the Greeks were a very interesting people, as they were always, they were big proponents of Jupiter and the idea that you were supposed to give someone who asked drink and food from you and, a place to stay. You were supposed to, literally tend to their needs, in the stead that you both, if they were in the other foot, if they were the ones with the home and you had come to their home and wanted something, that they would give it to you. Not necessarily like maybe the homeless, but more like, you're just a wandering traveler. You can go and be like, hey, I'd like to I'd like to be a guest in your home. And there are certain acts that are afforded to someone, like it's a strictly forbidden to kill someone when they are a guest in your home. That is what happens in Macbeth. That is his massive, crime against God. Um, so that's interesting, but okay. And divine love. All right. Let's go through these other ones. Even though I like the Greek philosophers probably more. So let's talk about all those real quick. So familial love, the love that you have for your family, and the love that you have for, or the care that you have for those around you. Not necessarily friendly love, because friendly love means people who are not in your family. So friendly love and platonic love are the same. Okay, well that makes more sense. I was wondering why they had both there. Um, yeah, so I mean that's just a very, very basic thing to just say, hey, these people are on a higher rung because they're in your family. I suppose that's fine. Romantic love and eros, yeah. And it's interesting too that when we talk of love, we talk about Aphrodite. We talk about the fact that Cupid was her son, and what some people don't know is that Cupid had arrows that were tipped with lead as well to make people not fall in the opposite of love, whatever it was that you would define that as. Um, so there's some interesting things with romantic love, and I think that's almost the only true love. Maybe love of self is maybe a little bit closer, or is a little bit closer to being true, but when we talk about love, or we talk about the care of a child, you may call it love because we don't have a better word for it, but I think love should almost be relegated simply to romantic love. And that there should be another word for how deeply you care for a child. Um, yeah, I feel that way in some senses, and maybe I'm wrong. Um, I don't know, because you have something like divine love there. Divine love. What a strange concept. The ideal of divine love. The love that you have for your God. Is that love? Is that devotion? Because, to me, most of what a God represents in senses are your devotion to a creed of ritualistic forms that make you act and justify yourself in certain ways. I don't know if that's love. All right, so let's go on real quick and just read what other authors have distinguished as varieties of love, and that's unrequited love, empty love, companionate. Weird, companionate. So a companion love that can't just be friendly. All right, consummate love, infatuated love, self-love, and courtly love. I'm just talking at this point. These things don't seem to mean anything. Um, for what it's worth, I guess when we're looking over the six forms of love from the Greeks, they probably have a good sense of, because love means like a care for their true, their nature, if they were in harm's way, I suppose. And I guess I keep going back to guest love because I understand how important guest. I don't know if rights is the right word to say, but guest allowances were to these people. Something like Achilles. He or Ulysses. Ulysses, when he went off to the Greek war, his wife Penelope was left alone, and eventually Ulysses ended up not coming back for a certain amount of time. Well, all of these suitors came, and the doctrine of guest love was basically like, I can't really kick them out because they're suiting for my hand as the queen, and even though I'm not going to marry them because I'm waiting for Ulysses to come back, is what Penelope's thinking, right? But she actually had to, she was housing all of these suitors for long periods of time that were just eating, the house and home, out. Well, probably not, but at the very least, just being annoyances. Um, and for the end of that little wrap up of that story, Ulysses comes back and ends up killing them all. So, interesting. Who in God's name knows what they're trying to really say with some of these, Um, it's interesting though how important family was to them that they actually like no no no. If they're your friends, they're your friends. If they're your family, it's a different love. That's interesting. Well, let's move on real quick, and I want to go and just talk about relationships in general. And relationships in general, wonder what they're going to show us when we see that. A lot of the same kind of ideals that they might have shown with love. Oh, I got big butt, on there. That's nice. Good for her. Um, okay, so relationships in general. So the thing is, when we say the word relationship, and I'd like to go back here from the images for a moment just to get the definition. Maybe Merriam-Webster here is going to be probably easiest. Oh, Merriam-Webster has been a little bit off lately. All right. The relation, okay, the state of being, oh, you hayatoma yasofarianaska. All right, anyway. So, the state of being related or interrelated. That's true. That's as simple as a relationship is, and that's why it's so strange that they have all of those images of love there. The relation connecting or binding participants in a relationship, such as kinship, which means they're part of your family, they are your kin. A specific instance or type of kinship, such as, I suppose, cousin? What? Oh, it's a relation. I don't know. It's a little strange how they're wording that. A state of affairs existing between those having relations or dealings. Exactly. Again, why is all of those images of love necessarily in a relationship? But we'll talk about that in a moment. A romantic or passionate attachment. And that's probably why. And also because, the most exciting and interesting things sell. And the most exciting and interesting things are, being in love, having a relationship with a woman or a man that you love, and they are, deeply in love with you, and you're relating on all of these levels, and you're making and building, and you're doing things together. The fact that also there's a business relationship doesn't seem to play into effect anywhere in any of these images. The fact that two people get together and they are contractually obligated to do certain things for each other based on, they got this factory and they've got this, supplies, and if you buy this many supplies, then I'll give them to you at this price, and if you do it under this amount of time, I'll give it to you at this price, and that's a relationship as well. And what's interesting is they both have kind of the same core values needed to have them succeed, which is trust. There is the need for honesty, and there's the need for transparency, I believe. That last one may be a little bit more in business, and not so much more in relationships. But it is important to, mention that transparency so that, someone doesn't, feel as if they are being led astray is incredibly important. Strange, though, that they don't have a single relationship on here that's, just people hanging out. That's interesting. Let's just keep looking. Wow. There's something interesting to be said about, the image searches when you look at particular words. And maybe even all of these random things. What makes a good relationship? 30 answers. What? Can't you define that on your own? Aren't you the one that should be able to justify whether or not you're happy or you're unhappy with the way that you're being treated? And the way that, your interactions with the person that you love is, commencing in a general way? What makes a good relationship? How could someone define that for you? Well, I don't know. I guess I'm trying to define it myself, aren't I? Trying to say that, you need trust and honesty. Trying to say you need transparency. You trying to say you need I think, a good way to say it is the way that was said in Down Abbey, that, you need to be on the side of the person. It doesn't matter if your principles matter, or if you want to take a principled stance almost. You have to actually be on the side of the person more. Your principles should almost take a back seat, unless, depending. This was, a money dispute thing that they're talking about from, or I'm talking about from Down Abbey. And, someone said, the man was like, I don't want to take the money and then give it, to the estate, because, you know, he doesn't know that I, loved you when I was, uh, you know, uh, going to marry her. And so basically, she's like, well, it doesn't fucking matter, you asshole. You have to be on our side, or else, that changes the way I feel about you. And, they resolved it so everybody was able to just go away without it being, without someone having to make a hard decision. And that sucks too. Because, oh, that's TV drama though, isn't it? No hard decisions. Everything's able to be wrapped up so that you're able to just be like, oh, sure, we can do it. But all the same, I mean, we'll just keep walking on here and seeing what the hell are all these relationships doing. Not a single god. Oh, here's a find bad relationships put your heart at risk in. What? No, they don't. Everything can put everything at risk. So let's not. Of course, bad relationships are not good for you. How could they be? How could anything that you would classify as bad be good? Unless you're saying it's bad. um, it's funny. I haven't heard that terminology be used in quite a long time. Saying something's bad when you mean it's good. That's bad, man. That's some bad shit. That's some badass shit there. I guess badass is still around. Um. So yeah. Oh, whoa! Look, finally a business relationship. Oh, another one. Oh, wow. Okay. See, so takes a while when you're looking at the images to get through to the fact that not everything is necessarily um, love and sex and you know oh good god, I didn't even look at the things for intimacy on the images. Holy shit, what are they going to show? That could be a problem. All right, so looking at intimacy now, we'll get a very basic definition here. The state of being intimate, familiarity, something of a personal or private nature. All right, that's not bad. The state of being intimate, the state of being familiar with someone. Maybe the state of being both familiar and very comfortable with someone should be the way that that's described, if we were to describe it a little bit better. Now, intimacy is something that maybe we can go ahead and toss out of the business relationship, and we can get back into the relationships which might be more friendship and love. And intimacy is one of those notions that is, again, a very hard one to maybe describe in real senses. When we see it here in some of the images that they're showing us for the word intimacy, you can see that intimacy seems to mean the act of physically, touching or kissing someone. Seems like almost exclusively. Or maybe it looks like the intimacy of, well, I think that you would be touching, your pregnant wife's stomach. That's not that strange. So, let's talk for a moment, if we can, about intimacy in a general sense. Now, intimacy is one of those things that when you have it with someone, you're basically, your relationship is that you are at a state of being friends. You are past the state of being just acquaintances. An intimate interaction with another person is, not necessarily always sexual. I would say that if someone let you even sleep in the same room that they sleep in. That's maybe an intimate act. You know, not sexual in any way, but I say that because when I was younger, I would go over to my friend's house, and sometimes I'd sleep on his couch there. And I think it's kind of almost intimate to literally be sleeping, you know, where you're hearing someone else snore in the same bedroom. I think there's a weird intimacy thing happening if you're in the same bedroom. Of course there is, I think. It doesn't mean it's sexual at all, but it shows a level of familiarity and comfortability with the other person. So that you're literally, I mean, and that's a good way to describe intimacy. And to reel it back from necessarily the intimacy that's only sexual. Um, can people be intimate without being even friends? Yes, a lot of people are far too intimate and don't realize it. I mean, you go and you meet someone for the first time and you hug them and you press your body up against theirs. Oh, that's pretty intimate. Now, you may say that's fine. There's nothing really wrong with it, and I probably agree with you. Um, Maybe you want to start off most relationships by breaking that intimacy barrier, and that's why it's a good idea to just hug someone. But, it's understandable that most men who are, not homosexual would gladly shake hands with another man instead of hug them, that they would rather keep that intimacy barrier up, seeing as this person whose hand they shook may be a complete stranger. Um, while I will say it may be the exact opposite for a female. Um, Perhaps not in a business setting. That would probably be unlikely. But for a female, I could see it that, you would definitely want to try to hug them instead of shake their hand. You'd want to start off on an intimate basis, unless you didn't want to be intimate with that person, I suppose. And, we can look at something like the Kesha Jerry Seinfeld, incident, where she's there and she's like, "Hey, I just want to hug you," and he's like, "Listen, I got intimacy issues where I don't just hug some random person that comes up to me." That's his real problem. It's intimacy. He doesn't, and it's not a problem necessarily. It's his decision to say, "I don't want to be intimate with some random person that I don't know." That's far too much for me. I don't understand why I would hug you, and I can understand why he would agree. I would agree with that. In most situations, like if I were, I see that there's the difference is that I've got, if like let's say I have my wife, and I don't have a wife, but we're just throwing this into the philosophy chamber here. I've got my wife, and she invites a couple of her friends over, and when they come over, she hugs them both and does like a European double cheek kiss thing. Should I then shake their hands? I might shake the hand of the man, unless he was like, "No, come on, give me a hug, it's nice to see you." It would have to be a little aggressive, and I would say, all right, you broke the intimacy barrier. I'm not gonna fucking fault you for it. That's fine. Um, but I would definitely do it to the woman because and that's just my own hangups, I suppose. And I'm not going to fight that. I'm not gonna have a problem with that. I believe that I can trust my own intuition when it comes to such things, and it's all right with me. If I say I don't want to hug someone, I don't want to hug them. I understand that. If I didn't, if I was maybe a little bit different and I didn't do the little double cheek kiss thing, and I just gave her a hug and said, "Well, it's nice to see you and it's nice to meet you," and shook the guy's hand, probably be okay. It's all the same, right? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Um, and maybe there is something good to be said about just breaking that intimacy barrier with almost any person. But, to say it quite frankly, the shaking of somebody's hand is a real breaking of an intimacy barrier. Because when you would meet people in, I want to say maybe, we'll go back to medieval to past that, Renaissance and maybe onward before the Industrial Revolution and before the major advent of guns, or at least their heavy distribution. Well, people would often have knives placed in their arms, and that's so that they could grab it and cut someone, right? So they have it here, and they can grab it out, and then jab someone. And so when you would go and shake hands, you weren't shaking your hand, you were shaking about here, And so you would go, and it's basically them saying, hey, you can come and check that I don't have any weapons. It was a showing that you were on equal footing with them, and that you weren't intending on backstabbing them. Which is what would actually occur. It's not like a facetious thing. It was a literal thing. So that is a big intimacy barrier, because you're saying, I trust you enough to show me that you don't have any weapons. And what if that person has a weapon on their other arm or something, or while you're shaking their hand, they stab you in the neck, It is an intimacy thing if you put it in such dire terms then, isn't it? So, I guess, and for men, who are much less attracted to each other on any kind of basis, even, they have to be really quite friendly for them to be, intimate on any level. I can understand why, my initial sentiment would be that if I saw my wife hug and do the little European double kiss thing, I would probably do it to the woman, and I would shake the man's hand. I think that's fair. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's I've got some intimacy issues. I don't know. So I think we've talked for a while about intimacy. Let's, for a moment, we'll just speak on to the images which they give you for intimacy, and we'll take a look at them while I drink some water. Okay. So how to enjoy deeper intimacy with God. That's a weird one, because I guess it's a familiarity to, what, are there real divinities that you're talking to, and it's not just, a faith thing? Because if so, then that's really incredible. Let me in on that. Otherwise, your intimacy is your intimacy with your faith. That'd probably be a better way to describe that. Let's keep going. So a lot of images of, again, sexual nature, of very closeness, having your faces literally so close to each other that almost all you see is each other's eyes. These aren't bad images for intimacy. There's nothing wrong with any of these. This is a good little showing of, intimacy, or maybe the lack of it. Yeah, this is fine. This is because intimacy is actually quite romantic in most senses, even though we did describe how it could be, or how friends could be intimate, with my simple example of, even sleeping in the same room is fairly intimate. I think it's fairly intimate too. I used to sleep in the same room with another friend of mine. We'd be I was on one couch, he was on this other thing that, there was a bed there, and, this was over at, my cousin's, and we would talk all night about stuff until we were tired, and then, and that's after we had laid down. So, I mean, that's very intimate. And that's, those are two friends. Nothing sexual. So intimacy can definitely be, friendly and not necessarily just sexual. But I do understand the way that they pose all this, because it shows, a grand familiarity with the other person. And that's easy to, what's funny is that these two people look even intimate, One could be in the other room if they don't want to be intimate. Yeah, so that's much more intimate than the average two people, aren't they? Even if they seem to be in a moment of fight, look, some swans that are intimate. And see, that's a very good showing again, that intimacy maybe is just a strong familiarity with and a willingness to be close to. All right, let's move on to, well, we could go to trust or we could go to friendship real quick. Let's move to trust, since we've been talking about some, kind of more general ideas and not talking about, the ships like relationships or friendship, love ship. All right, so trust. The first thing we see is National Gun Trust. That's interesting. But we're just going for a quick, dictionary assessment here. So, assured reliance on the character, ability, strength, or truth of someone or something. Assured reliance, not just reliance, but you're sure of that reliance. That's a hard one to pass, isn't it? Because not only do you have to be reliable in character or ability, strength, or truth of someone or something, but you have to convince the other person that you're reliable. This is a matter of not even your actions, but the actions or the thoughts of another person. It's very, very difficult to gain trust. You can see why, with that first definition, that assured reliance is so much harder a hedge to bound over than just reliance, because reliance says nothing about the ideals of the person who is trusting you. If you could be trustworthy by just always doing something, and then they put their trust into you instead of actually believed in that trust, and then you did something against their will or badly to harm them, I guess that would kind of speak to maybe intuition and the idea of assured reliance being, more of an intuition of an individual and how you feel. It's such a strange thing. One in which confidence is placed. So someone whom you're confident about, or whom you're willing to tell your secrets to, or maybe not your secrets to, but you're willing to rely on. Again, rely seems to keep coming back up. Dependence on something future or contingent. Hope. Trust. You trust me. Which is again assured reliance, it sounds like. Reliance on future payment for property. That's a trust. Okay. A property interest held by one person for the benefit of another. So again, it's about assured reliance, though. It's about the fact that you are assured that this person is reliable, so you're putting your property interests in their hands. Yeah. It's all. I feel like this has been a very, very good one, where it's got a real clear, understandable point by the first two words, assured reliance. That's a very clear definition for trust. Character, a charge of duty imposed in faith or confidence, or as a condition of some relationship. The child committed to her trust. Something committed or entrusted to one to be used or cared for in the interest of another. Okay. So I think we've got a pretty good idea of what they would intend when they say trust. See if they've got any images that aren't stupid here. A lot of just images of the word trust. Maybe a couple showings of people needing to trust others. That's valuable. I wonder, if you're watching this, if you've ever done the trust fall, where you're on a little bit of a high ledge, and then there's 15 or 20 people down arm's length, or our arms are at the edge of the ledge, and you've got them lined up so that, there's a fairly large plank worth of arms, right? And then you're supposed to just close your eyes and just fall back and trust that they're going to catch you. It would be a very bad trust exercise if they dropped you. That is true, but would it be a bad trust exercise, or would you just not trust that person? I guess that's what a trust exercise is. It's making it so you trust the individual person. You're not trying to make... Well, when you're younger, I feel like some of those trust fall things they ask for you to do is so that you trust in society almost in general, not in individuals. So, assured reliance. See, the thing is that when you're doing a trust fall, you have zero assured reliance. You only have the words of the people, and you have to decide. Again, it's a matter of belief, it seems, when it comes to trust. What an interesting thing. And trust, for what it's worth, one of the most important things I think when it comes to a relationship, your ability to say that I don't believe that this person is lying to me. What a great thing would that be to know in your, well, you couldn't truly know, but in your own heart and mind, you believed what they said when what they said seemed maybe, well, yeah, that's just it. If they were inconsistent, you would trust them less. So I would say that trust is something that, you know, assured reliance. I keep going back to that idea. Assured reliance that the other person is going to do. See, but I mean, when you look at some of these images, these aren't trust. This person trusting this person to pull them up, because there is no assured reliance that that person won't falter and fall, having nothing to do with the fact that they, well, I guess you could say, oh no, well, I know that this person can lift 180 pounds easily when they go up like this, so I have that. There's that assured reliance again. It keeps coming into play. So that, most of the things that I'm trying to say don't make sense in these images of trust actually do, because you can justify that you say, no, I trust it. And even though the other person could say to you after you had trusted them that you weren't sure and that, thank God it turned out okay, would that change that moment where you trusted them because you did? And since it turned out positive and not negative, is that a matter of assured reliance? It's a strange question. And here they have an interesting thing that says, trust takes years to build, seconds to break, and forever to repair. That is a very apt way to describe trust. All right, I think we're going to go on to friendship for a moment. And friendship is a relationship of mutual affection between people. I like that definition to start out with, for what it's worth. A relationship of mutual affection between people. Not sexual necessarily in any way, but just affection. I like you. You seem to be someone whom I'm able to interact with and have a relationship with, and I don't dislike it. We mutually don't dislike it. That is friendship. What's strange about friendship is that there are times where you have a relationship of what seems to be mutual affection, but in fact the other person is not even close to the same form or level as you, and that's where you get people thinking that they're friends or they have friends that are good, and realizing only later that these friends are actually, I don't know, pariahs, leeches upon them. That they were, creatures which fed upon their form instead of making them more potential, more. And, I'm sure a great many people, and I don't have that many people that I would apply that to. I had mostly very good friends, and, there are a few people I would apply it to, and for good reason. But usually for me, I noticed what I would say a lack of mutual affection when I would ask of them something grand that I needed after having provided for them, probably endlessly, but maybe not in such grand ways as maybe I would ask from them. So, I feel like you'll often get to a point in a friendship where you believe that you have a different relationship than you have with this person, and you will ask of them something higher than the mutual affection that they held for you or that they think you've ever held for them, and they'll deny you, and you'll say, well, wait, I actually cared about you in this higher sense, and they say, no, I don't care about you. Um, and even though they may say to you, "Oh no, we're friends," and you may even be very friendly, you can see that there was a break in what they're saying is a strong form of an interpersonal bond, and that break maybe gives you awareness of all of the other things that maybe weren't where you had sacrificed instead of them sacrificing, and it turned out that they were not your friends in truth. Um, and that's true. That is a truth that must be addressed because we are such kind creatures that we will create friendships that are truly actually only casual acquaintances, or maybe even people who we are near far too often. That's how I describe it. People who we're just too relatively close to, too intimate with far too often because they aren't our friends. So such levels of intimacy only tend to hurt us in the long run because the person who you're being intimate with is not your friend and will instead take advantage of that level of intimacy which you're willing to engage in. I don't have any of these horror stories of being a child and having, my friends not be nice to me. I suppose some of my cousins' friends, were kind of cunts where they would try to mess with me a little, try to put my hand in hot water, that would work. And I'd be like, I'd look up at them. I'd be like, what, are you guys retarded? What is wrong with you? I'm sleeping. Get the fuck out of here. Things like that. Stupid things for their children, But see, that's kind of that same idea. And I know that all of those people weren't my friends in any capacity. I understand that idea. I understand that my cousins were my friends, and that they weren't the ones, egging on the stupidity of, the things that these other people were saying. But, also, they never did anything that was even relatively bad, or else I would have broken their heads in. So, maybe not. I don't know. I would, it's not that hard to hit somebody with something that's metal. I mean, really. So, those people I know weren't my friends. I get that idea. But I never had the, person who would have me do negative things without caring about me, who I thought was also my friend at any point. I had people who I would help as acquaintances in ways that were self-sacrificing and too intimate, perhaps. But, I knew better than to think that, they were my friends on a grander level. I knew where we stood and how, and that's good. And it's important too, because if you are too easily, if you have your heart on your sleeve always, then you're too easily intimate, you're too easily made, into, I suppose, the sucker, into the person who's the idiot, into the fool. And it is very important when we talk about friendships that you analyze the people that are around you, what they do, how they act, and whether they care about you in any real way. And you'll often find that they do. And that's why you have these people in your lives instead of other people who you completely ignore and don't speak to. It's understandable, I'd say that. And, friendship, probably one of the grandest things in the world outside of, love and, intimate relationships with the opposite sex for me and for you, whatever, I don't care what you're doing. So there is something very important to be, remarked about friendship, that and how important it is, the socialization, and also the way that you affect one another, the way that your two halves, are literally making, two different wholes. And that's what's very interesting, two different holes. but the two halves of you are actually growing, and you're benefiting and generating uh, social understanding from one another, one another, and those things are incredibly important, especially as you're growing up. And it's also important to check your friends and decide who is a good friend and who isn't, because you really will have someone that is friendly and intimate and caring, but wants you to do all the wrong things because they're just in, a state of dysfunction for whatever reason. And sometimes it's hard to know what caring is, what being good is, what being just to one another is. So I would say, as we kind of wrap up talking about the human condition in general, that we really need to say, relationships and friendships are incredibly important. And they are so incredibly important that you must not interact with just anyone. You must not interact. You can, but you should have your intuition and senses when they tell you that this is wrong on whatever levels, that you can follow it, and you can still be friendly to some extent, but the levels of intimacy might change. And they very well should, for somebody who is the guy that you see down at the bar, who you talk to every few days or something, versus if you see him at the gym and then you guys talk, and then you work out, and then you literally he invites you to go and hang out. That'll change those intimacy levels. And if that person is just at the bar and you never see them at the gym, well, maybe that person isn't the person that you want to get into a grander intimacy level with, right? Because you are giving of yourself and you are taking of them. So do you want to take of them? That is the question when you're talking about your friends. This doesn't mean that you should be a closed-minded person without justifying your opinion to others. That's not the friends I'm talking about. I'm not talking about opinions, really. I'm talking about the fact, and you will, for what it's worth, opinions will bleed into one another when you are friends and you're close enough. But I am talking about the actual form. Imagine a person who's like, you go over to his house and he's sitting on the couch all day, smoking weed. There's no weights, anything there. You guys just smoke, you hang out, you go to sleep. Imagine that same person with a boxing, or a punching bag in his room. And every once in a while he gets up and he starts punching at it, Aren't you eventually going to get up and start punching at that punching bag? The answer is yes. And if you're sitting there talking about philosophy all day long, don't you think he's going to learn something about philosophy? And see, that's the thing with friendships. That if you're actually just sitting there and doing nothing, or you're smoking crack, and you're not, your friend's smoking crack and you're not, and you guys are friends, well, eventually you're going to be like, we're friends. I should smoke crack with you. Or you would hope on the opposite level that they would say, you don't smoke crack. I should not smoke crack anymore. That's what you would hope. And that's the extreme version. The much more regimented and normal version would be, I eat excessively. I eat incredibly. I don't. But if someone were to eat excessively, and they go around to, and they go to someone else who doesn't eat excessively, well, you know how easy it is to translate eating excessively to another person? Because you both go to a large gathering, or you go to a restaurant and you make this huge, pile that they've never seen before. They didn't know you're supposed to order 3 plates and 2 appetizers. And so they're just like, yeah, this is great. Of course. Why wouldn't you do this? But, the person next to you with only one appetizer and one entree is looking at you like, what are you doing? Because they would never have that conception in their mind, and so would the other person who you've just influenced by your excessive eating habits. It just wouldn't occur to them. And that does matter, because people have something like speed that they'll do. It wouldn't have occurred to them, but their friends and they're smoking speed. Maybe they should try it. Should they? No. But your friend's doing it, so your friend's eating a lot of food. Your friend says, hey, let's go out for ice cream after we've had, a huge meal. I mean, it's your friend and you're having fun. Why not go out for ice cream? And then once you're done with that ice cream, you're literally walking out of, a big mall area and you see a Cinnabon. And your friend's like, hey, man, I see you looking at a Cinnabon. You want to go get a Cinnabon? And he's like, it's my treat. And you're like, yeah, sure, let's go get a Cinnabon. But, you normally at that time of the year would be, or at that time of day would be out running. Well, I mean, you can see how these two people are not, the same person. And how these friendships, are affecting each other in maybe a negative way depending on the level of intimacy. So, I would say that you would hope the opposite was happening, though, right? You'd hope that the other person was more persuasive and said, no, why don't we go out and run? Or let's go out and do something, healthy and get our bodies going instead of just eat more. You'd hope that, but who knows how it works out. And the thing is that you capitulate to your friends because you love and care for them. You have a level of intimacy and you have a familiarity with them. So when they have bad habits, it's very easy for you to have bad habits. It's not always the case, but I will say that, when the human condition is such that they are living near another who is different from them, it is more likely that they are going to develop some of those different traits than to completely alienate every single one of them. Because otherwise they wouldn't have that person near them. So, with that said, I think I'm going to go ahead and cut it here. I think this has been a very good podcast. Very basic, very superficial perhaps. But, that's kind of what we've been delving into lately. Just swimming those shallow waters and kind of just talking about the concepts. The concepts are very important, and it's a value to lay them out even when they have to be laid out in such a simplistic form. Because, otherwise, how do you get deeper into the web? So, I'm going to go ahead and cut it there, like I said. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks again for watching.